Two substantial polls have been released as we head into the second week of the campaign. The Resolve poll, well, we looked at that one last night, and now today's Newspoll. And what both polls show is how difficult the path to victory is for both of the major parties. In the Newspoll, the ALP is sitting on a primary vote of 36 and the Coalition on 35. Now, the Greens will help Labor lift up from where they're sitting, but it's too low for a coalition majority government win. But as I said in my earlier remarks, a real concern for both major parties in Newspoll will be the very high other vote, 29%. That's a record for Newspoll and a real worry as the campaign teams on the left and the right try and get those undecided or uncommitted major party voters. Here's analysis on all of this in the big campaign news today. We'll bring in now Sky News Political Editor Andrew Clennell, who's in Western Australia, travelling on the PM's team today. Andrew, thank you for your time, mate. It's a real pox on both your houses here for the two major parties in Newspoll, isn't it?
Oh, it absolutely is, Peter. I think it's an extraordinary situation. No matter how much Anthony Albanese stuffs up, Scott Morrison can't make up the ground. Now, my experience of elections is close elections, they go to the devil you know at the end, the incumbent. And I think that's Scott Morrison's great hope here, that and he hopes Anthony Albanese makes more mistakes and doesn't quite look like a leader. So that's why the Sky People's Forum is quite an important sort of first step in this situation tomorrow night in Brisbane. But outside of that, it's a despairing situation in a sense for the coalition, because what do you do to get that number up? Now, they're actually quite confident behind the scenes it will happen, but they also concede they can lose. From Labor's point of view, after such a horror week, they sort of think, well, at least we're in the game. But it really shows, as you say, a pox on both houses. And, of course, that's when you can end up with a hung parliament, because that's a result where neither leader inspires the voter, neither side of politics sells the message sufficiently to win votes, and therefore you get a no result.
Yeah, I think there was a real turning of the tables last week. I watched Stuart Robert in a press conference almost get cocky after a bad week for Labor. And today I saw Christina Keneally out there very positively spruiking for her leader. The Australian Financial Review had a reader poll. It said 60% of respondents weren't at all worried about the economic gaffes, that it won't affect their votes. I think Newspoll's a lagging poll. I do think it'll tighten up. But this will be shaking up MPs who think after last week the job's done.
Yes, well, that's right. I mean, what it does, it'll address complacency on both sides of the fence, won't it? There's a contest on. It's what makes it such a fascinating campaign and a fascinating one for us to cover. And one little thing can turn things. I thought Albanese was potentially dead after he couldn't answer to me the national unemployment rate on that first day. It appears not. But there's no doubt he's gone from a Labor majority to potentially Labor minority position. He wouldn't want things to get worse. The momentum is against him, but it's not necessarily for the government. And I think this says something about the fact that Scott Morrison, even though he's leading Anthony Albanese in the preferred PM stakes, he's got a long way to go to get the trust of Australian voters again. They're still blaming him for mistakes such as the vaccine rollout.
But it's still the devil they know, and while they can't flesh out Albanese, and I agree with you, the People's Forum tomorrow night will be critical in this, while they can't flesh him out, they're likely to stay with the incumbent. Interestingly, a big push today on scare campaigns again. They're a feature of the campaigns in 2019, 2016. This one, the latest one from Labor, is targeting pensioners. Have a listen.
The Labor Party is ringing up people, sending out brochures, writing to pensioners and scaring them that there'd be some suggestion that our government would be applying the debit card to pensioners. It's just simply not true. And Anthony Albanese needs to come clean on this. But when it comes to the issue of electricity prices, it isn't just the government. Tony Wood from the Grattan Institute has said today that Labor's electricity policy, their poles and wires policy, is a bit of a mess. They end up building stuff at the wrong place at the wrong time. That's what he has said. There's been similar critical comments from the Victorian Energy Policy Centre, Frontier Economics. I mean, this is like Labor's aged care policy, which fell apart after a couple of days when they didn't know how many nurses they need.
Now, despite the Prime Minister's comments, here was Labor's Christina Keneally on Sky News this afternoon.
We know that this government is in love with the cashless debit card. If they could, they would roll it out to everybody on a form of welfare, including pensioners.
And they wonder, Andrew, why there's a pox in both their houses. I mean, the PM couldn't have been clearer. And then there's Labor out there saying, no, he's lying and he's going to do it anyway.
Well, it's a race to the bottom in more ways than the polls, isn't it, Peter? But Labor saying the same, of course, about the modelling Angus Taylor produced the same trick as last election around their policies about powering the nation. I think it'll get dirtier. I think it'll get more and more misleading. You've seen the government say Albanese is about death taxes from comments he made 30 years ago. In a kind of a policy vacuum on both sides, let's face it, this is what you're going to get. You're going to get both sides talking about what the other side might do, or trying to convince you what they might do. But that's why you need journalism, isn't it, to say, well, this is actually not true and it's not happening.